Professor Rajan, thank you very much for being with us.
Of course.
Let's start with deglobalization, which seems to have been quite a topic in the last few months. Do you see, has that development already started, and what are early consequences? So is the world really breaking apart into different blocks?
Well, it certainly is going against globalization. If you look at the trade restrictions, for example, that were put in place, they've increased considerably, but through the pandemic, they've gone up. I think if you look at foreign direct investment, for example, into China from the US, it's fallen off significantly. If you look at trade, it hasn't come off so much. There has been a revival of trade after it fell during the early days of the pandemic. If you look at flows from China, you see direct flows, say, for example, from China to the United States have come down, that is exports. But if you look at what's happening, some of those exports are going to Vietnam and then being exported to the US. So in actual trade terms, I don't see it hasn't been as problematic, but I think it's building up for the future, for example, through the slowdown in foreign direct investment.
So staying with the United States and China, they seem to be drifting apart in an economic as well as a technological sense. How do political benefits and economic harm align?
Well, I think it's convenient for both sides to point to the other as a kind of scapegoat for many of the ills that they have domestically, right? So for the US, the loss of manufacturing jobs is because China has cheated, including on acquiring intellectual property. And from China's perspective, there's a sense that the US is standing in the way of its legitimate growth. And that's something that plays well in China. I think, so short-term political benefits on both sides. And that is one reason why the Biden administration has continued with many of the policies that the Trump administration put in place. The problem, of course, is that this kind of protectionism doesn't sort of stay contained. It tends to spread. And one of the worries is that it's not just limited to, say, high tech. It moves to other areas. We worry about the security of food, the security of this and the security of that. Even green equipment, we worry about, should we be dependent on the other country for that? So my worry is, under the guise of security, we'll get more and more protectionism, and that'll hurt both countries economically.
If we look at the world as a whole, debt levels have gone up quite considerably. Interest rates are still high. Is another debt crisis looming? And how does that affect your economic outlook for the world for the next 18 to 24 months?
Well, I think two parts of that proposition are right? We have seen debt levels go up significantly for every kind of country, whether it's developed country, emerging market, or developing country. We've also seen interest rates go up around the globe. And then the question is, yes, this is going to increase stress. For some countries, it's already created a crisis. Think of Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Ecuador. There are countries that are finding difficulty already. For some countries, I think, they've weathered the problems so far. Think of Brazil, for example, which typically used to have a problem when interest rates went up in the developed countries, or think of Mexico. They've done reasonably well so far. And, so India, Indonesia, they've been okay. The question is, as interest rates stay high for longer, who starts having problems? And typically, I think it's a combination of both your debt level, but also your political consensus. If you can manage to do the adjustments, the economic adjustments that are required, your politics allows that, then I think you're in a much better place than if you also have fractured politics. And as a result, you cannot do the economic adjustments, and then you move quite quickly into a debt crisis. A number of developing countries are facing some troubles going forward. And, for some of them, the politics don't look good either.
But as a whole, what is your outlook for the year to come? Or rather on the optimistic or on the pessimistic side of things?
I think the global economy is slowing. This year was unexpectedly good relative to the prognosis that was the prospects that people thought would be at the beginning of this year. And I think the sense is we've sort of pushed the slowing into next year. But a slowing has to come to bring down levels of inflation. In Europe, we're already seeing significant slowing. In the US, we will probably see it coming in towards the end of the year and into next year. And of course, developed countries slowing is not good news for the emerging markets, which rely on exporting to the developed world. So they too will see some slowing there. And of course, the big sort of engine of global growth over the last decade or so, was China. And China is missing in action for the most part at this point, trying to keep to the 5% for this year and probably will succeed. But next year will probably be slower. And the question is, what is China's potential growth now, given all the headwinds they have, including the property sector and including the kinds of changes they're trying to make? And it may be much lower than we had in the past.
Thank you very much for your insights, Sir Rajan.
Thank you.